Well, happy holidays, everybody. I'm Leo Laporte, and this is our annual Best of episode. Carson and our editors have put together a great show with some of the funniest and finest and most intriguing moments of 2020. It's coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Tech, episode 751 for December 29th, 2019, the year's best. This Week in Tech is brought to you by Health IQ. Health IQ uses science and data to secure lower life insurance rates for healthy people like you. To see if you qualify, go to healthiq.com/twit and take the Health IQ quiz. It could save up to 41% on your life insurance premiums compared to other providers. And by LastPass, a personal password manager and identity solution for businesses, all in one. You only need one master password, and LastPass remembers the rest. Visit lastpass.com/twit to learn more. And by Mack Weldon. Mack Weldon is a premium men's essentials brand that believes in smart design and premium fabrics. For 20% off your first order, go to mackweldon.com and enter the promo code TWIT. Well, it's that time of year again, the final episode of 2019 as we head into 2020. We'll be back on January 5th. Our first episode of the new year will be all new. Should be exciting because right after that episode, I'll be flying down to Las Vegas for a whole week of CES. I haven't gone to CES in years. That'll be interesting, and I hope you'll watch our special CES coverage. It'll be Ant and Leo's excellent CES adventure. We're going to go booth to booth and talk about a whole bunch of new products. We've got Sam Abul-Samad. He's going to be our car guy. We have Stacy Higginbotham on IoT, Dick DiBartolo with the junk in the basement of the Sands, and Scott Wilkinson on home theater. So we've got a lot of material from CES that'll be coming up in about 2 weeks, all week long, January 6th through our wrap-up on January 10th. But we're still in 2019, and we've got some wild stories from that year, including, this didn't get a lot of attention, but I still think it's pretty important. A big win for the public domain. So, as of a couple of days ago, a number of works from everything from 1923 became public domain.
Oh my gosh! Like what falls inside that umbrella?
I'm sorry, 1922. Yeah,
the Great Gatsby.
Yeah,
Steamboat Willie would be included.
Well, Steamboat Willie's 1924. So this is what will be interesting to watch. There is no Sonny Bono anymore to get the copyright extension law. That's what happened last time.
There will only be one Sonny Bono.
It's the first time in 21
Sonny
years.
Bono Memorial Ski Run.
In 21 years, the first time that anything's gone into the public domain. In more than 2 decades. That's how significant this is.
I'm with Alex on this because if you create something, fine, but give it 25 years and then it goes public domain. Some of the arguments they're putting forward for 80 years public domain, or not even maintaining the copyright after the author's dead.
That's ridiculous.
F. Scott Fitzgerald is no longer benefiting from the Great Gatsby.
Oh, but his estate is.
Right, but it's
the Great Gatsby, January 2021, 2 years off. Rhapsody in Blue next January.
Excellent.
The Sun Also Rises in 2022, but the big one is going to be January 1st, 2024. That's when not only Steamboat Willie, but also Superman and Batman and Snow White.
Oh, that's going to lead to an awful lot of good films.
Well, this is the interesting thing. I mean, in the past, of course, Disney based their entire work on other people's work. Even, by the way, I should point out Steamboat Willie was stolen.
True.
But Grimm's Fairy Tales, public domain. They were able to make Cinderella and Snow White. But then they pulled the ladder up behind them, made it copyright.
Exactly.
And every time this has come up, they've got Congress to extend it. The last one was Sonny Bono's Copyright Term Extension Act in 1999. That added 20 years, keeping everything locked up until January 1st. So it is 1923 works are now coming into public domain.
I'm probably in the minority,
decades.
But I'd love to see a blockbuster movie of The Great Gatsby starring Superman, Batman, and Snow White.
I did not know where that was going. That would
be a great opening party scene.
I would watch that.
By the way, I have to correct myself. Sonny Bono was already dead when the copyright extension term was passed.
Okay.
He died in 1998. So Congress, to honor him,
I see.
What an honor, too. Named the
honoring a wife
copyright
beater. Such a different time in those days.
It was a different time back in the 20th century. So this is interesting. Apparently, you can take some credit for this. Yeah. The internet takes some credit for this. The Motion Picture Association of America, the Recording Industry Association of America, the Authors Guild, all of whom have been ones to lobby for the extension in the past, gave up. It's not something we're pursuing, said the RIAA, because there's now a well-organized grassroots lobby against copyright extension. There are large business interests, Google, now on the anti-expansion side, also a wide popular movement they can tie it into. The internet activism.
Yep.
The netroots.
Netroots. I think that's a good thing.
This is why sites like TechDirt, they really keep tabs.
Thank you,
on
Mike
this stuff.
Masnick. Yeah, really appreciate the work he does there.
Super important acts of journalism that do lead to change in how we think about things. Because the RIAA is not notorious for its cuddliness, its politeness, and its willingness to give away profits. Yeah. But we're going to get some of our stuff back into our own culture that we made, and it should be tied to commercial
demands.
It was
interesting. The movie, the Motion Picture Ass of America, really did back down on this, and they were just like, we're not going to win. This is costing us too much. Also, it's costing them an awful lot in terms of legal fees and false positives. When the RIA did that big anti-piracy campaign, started suing people for downloading, they lost a ton of money on that. The only people that got rich on that were lawyers.
He Jiankui did, in fact, China has confirmed, use CRISPR to gene edit babies. Those babies were born, and China says he forged ethical review papers, recruited 8 couples to participate in his experiment, resulting in 2 pregnancies. One of the mothers gave birth to twins nicknamed Lulu and Nana. These are the first, as far as we know, humans born with their genes CRISPR edited. He had removed a gene that supposedly would give these children better resistance to HIV and other diseases, smallpox, I think. But the problem with CRISPR gene editing is the side effects are unknown. And while people have done this in the lab to rats and other things, it's the first time we know of that. And this was a big story. When we talked about this, it was unclear whether it had really happened. But now that we know it's really happened, I think this is a watershed moment.
Yeah, CRISPR is likely to be one of the biggest breakthrough technologies of this century. When we get to the end of the century and we look back, like it is likely to be, one of the big ones. Moving too fast in this area is fraught with all kinds of risks and dangers that it just doesn't feel like we should be, moving that quickly, right? There should be a lot more research. There should be a lot more things done in labs before we put this in human beings. So that's the scary part, and that's why I think the scientific world is really cringing and has been cringing about this, and why they haven't supported obviously the work. Every
nation has laws against this. I mean, this is everybody agrees this is not the time to start doing this. Although once the genie's out of the bottle,
well, don't you think, not to be too cynical about it, but part of it is like some of the articles that I've read, like people are suggesting that this guy kind of did this on his own, was going to promote himself, and so not to be overly cynical, but like if China was the first to make some sort of CRISPR breakthrough, I feel like that they would have gotten behind it and like look at how Chinese technology and medicine is so I'm wondering if the problem here is that this guy was sort of a lone wolf that was trying to be a little too promotional, because if he wasn't and there was real legitimate breakthroughs, I don't feel like China would be throwing him under the bus like this.
Yeah. I'm not sure. He's disappeared from sight.
I think there's 2 things here that we aren't considering. One is that the current research indicates that the use of the CRISPR technology is actually incredibly damaging to the genes themselves. So not only are you using CRISPR to target specific genes, but what's coming out is the evidence is that CRISPR is actually damaging entire gene structures.
Right.
So you may actually be causing more genetic defects than you're actually fixing. And so this is the reverse side of a breakthrough. The reality starts to set in that there might be some downsides.
The children are not being identified by the Chinese government, but the Chinese government says we are going to monitor them because there is some concern about their long-term health.
Well, there's a great
Remember
deal of
when
concern
Dolly the sheep was the first cloned animal these cloned sheep died very quickly because it turned out not only were they cloning the sheep, they were cloning their biological clock.
Yeah. So the senescence was actually cloned at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge here with the CRISPR stuff is they're actually attacking the germline. So what that means, if those children have genetic defects, they'll carry through into the children of those babies, and so they replicate down through the years. And we don't want a situation perhaps where uncontrolled use of CRISPR that is actually damaging to the germline then gets fed into the gene pool.
Face recognition under the gun. San Francisco has now passed a city ordinance banning face recognition tech. On Tuesday, the Board of Supervisors passed the Stop Secret Surveillance Ordinance. Oh, I love living in the Bay Area. But I actually am thrilled about this because, as we know, well, here's what Supervisor Aaron Peskin said, the sponsor. I want to be clear, this is not an anti-technology policy. It's an accountability measure to ensure safe and responsible use of surveillance tech, and it passed by 8-1. And clearly, we're starting to see the flaws in face recognition. And I'll give you a really great example from Vice this week. So when the police department interviews you and says, well, the guy who did it, what did he look like? If you say, well, kind of looked like Woody Harrelson, they'll take a picture of Woody Harrelson and feed it to the face recognition technology. Law enforcement, this is a great piece in Vice, is identifying suspects based on all manner of probe photos of unknown individuals submitted for search against a police or driver's license database, including celebrities. Harrelson's photo, in this case, returned. So a guy was caught on camera stealing beer from a CVS in New York City. The surveillance footage was so low quality, they didn't get any suspects. No hits on the NYPD face recognition system. So the detective swapped in Woody Harrelson, saying, well, he looks kind of like Woody. And yes, they got a lot of hits, including the guy who did it. Now, you tell me, if I'm Woody Harrelson, I'm going to be a little insulted. He looks more like Colonel Sanders than Woody Harrelson.
Looks like a Klingon without the forehead appliance. Yeah.
The NYPD also fed an image of an unnamed New York Knicks player to find a Brooklyn man wanted for assault. I think this is not ideal. Can we say? And so I kind of think that maybe San Francisco did the right thing. What do you think?
And also,
I think it's creepy. I'm ready to invest in fake noses and sunglasses. So
I mentioned this before. Our founding engineer, Colleen, who now works for Facebook, right? She went to the dark side. Had a plan to build an LED collar with infrared LEDs that were so bright they would blind cameras, so you just look like a glowing ball on camera.
See if Carson can look this up real quick. But there's a shirt that had a T-shirt that's being sold.
Oh yeah,
that'll trick. You maybe talked about it.
But I remember reading it.
Yeah, so it's got some sort of a graphic on it that will fool the cameras to be like, well, this is not a person.
Yeah.
Forget about this is not going to solve the facial recognition thing, but yeah, there's a shirt out there if you're in a crowd in a protest, in theory.
It's the Hyperface Anti-Paparazzi collection. Actually, that's different. This is glowing.
Yeah, because that's only if it flashes.
Yeah.
That's for the flash of the cameras, and then it's reflective, so it reflects back. Sounds like a brilliant idea.
That's a great idea. This is Hyperface, which apparently, if you wear this on a T-shirt, this image, you don't have to wear it on your face. You wear it on a T-shirt, and the cameras go. But on the other hand, this is being designed by an artist, so I'm nervous about the whole thing.
Yeah, and how many software updates until the cameras just get smart enough to get around that?
Right,
I mean,
it's immediately been borked.
Still, I like the idea. The other problem is if you're a person of color, if you're African American, there's a much higher incidence of false positives, mostly because this stuff's trained on white folk. So that's not a good thing.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but all this law said was that the city cannot use this technology. This doesn't say that any grocery store or private home or whatever cannot use this technology.
Yeah, I don't think they can even stop you, right? Or maybe I guess they could.
It's not like, well, in theory, you could say something stops at the borders of our municipality, but
that's hard to do. Yeah, no, the ordinance says that city departments have to seek specific approval before acquiring any new surveillance equipment. And private companies are not affected, although if you wanted to sell tech to the city government of this kind, you would be, but not if you're a CVS store that wants to have it in there. Actually, there's some very beneficial uses of face recognition. Who was the artist who had a problem with stalkers, and she used face recognition to... Who was it? Richard... Huh?
It was Tay-Tay.
Tay-Tay. Taylor Swift, that's right. And so they used face recognition at the concert entrances to look for bad guys. We know other stadiums have used it to ban people who are known disruptors or problems. On the other hand, if you get a false positive and you can't go to the Tay-Tay show, that sucks.
Well, the classic positive use of it is that they always trot out is if you've lost a kid in Disney World.
There you go. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a demo at Qualcomm's AI Day a few weeks back where they were, showing you an interpreted form of what the AI sees when the camera looks at you in, say, a retail storefront situation. And, it's meant to do the catch shoplifters thing.
Right.
But the demo was calibrated to detect whether, to try and guess your apparent gender, and also your age. So I wasted probably 35 minutes just trying various pouts and smiles to get it to go from adult person to young person.
And did it?
And I was able to fooled it about 3 or 4 times.
Well, right now I'm trying to guess how old you are. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, it's too fuzzy. I got some Vaseline on the lens.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen so many examples of these things making horrible mistakes. Somebody in the chat room is saying it wasn't so long ago a Google AI thought a turtle was a gun. Right. So, and honestly, let's think about this use case in Disneyland. So what is it doing? Looking at everybody at Disneyland to see if they're the lost kid?
Yeah, I mean,
they would find the person that took the child, but your child's still gone. This is better for finding someone that
no. It's not a stranger danger abduction. It's just the kid got lost.
Right.
It could be either or, though.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah, what I'm saying is like, again, I don't know. That's just the thing that they trot out all the time.
I feel like any human could walk into a crowd and see a kid wandering going, "Where's my mommy?" I mean, how hard is that?
Yeah.
And you do a better job probably
that
than
would exactly happen
machine.
Faster than it would to get the cameras and then, deal with all the data and then find them that way.
I'm ashamed to admit I'm a terrible parent. I lost my daughter at Legoland. But I got somebody who's better, and she graduated from college, so I feel like it was truly terrifying. I was there with my son and daughter. Thank God my wife wasn't there at the time. She would have killed me. She's hearing about it for the first time now. And I'm with Henry, and where's Abby? And we, I went immediately to the entrance to block whoever stole her from getting out, which is stupid, but she found us, and she was not happy. She said, I was shopping. She was like 8. I was in the store looking at Lego. Ever since San Francisco banned face recognition, more and more cities are doing it. I think even states are thinking about it. This definitely is a trend, and we'll keep watching that in 2020. Our Best of show brought to you today by Health IQ, a life insurance agency for people who are healthy. Healthy like you. Are you paying attention to your diet? Are you exercising 4 or more times a week? Do you make sure you get at least 8 hours of sleep on average? You're going to live longer. You still need to, protect your family in case something happens. The problem is that for most life insurance companies, you're just a number, and they don't take into account your healthier lifestyle. That's why you need Health IQ. They use science and data to get lower life insurance rates for people like you, health-conscious people. In fact, you can get as much as $1 million in life insurance for $36 a month. The health-conscious folks like you and me have overpaid and subsidized basically the less healthy people in our society. It's not a conspiracy. That's just how statistics work, how life insurance works. You might be healthy, but your health insurance company doesn't really know that. You're just a number to them. Enter Health IQ. Basically, your life insurance concierge. They're going to actually represent you with one of the top 30 life insurance companies. They work with 30 of them, and get your a policy, a really good policy, for a much lower cost. I'll give you an example. Our friend Ant Pruitt is a weightlifter. Now, his body mass index is very high because it's all muscle, but BMI doesn't take that into account. So that number to a life insurance company looks bad. They might say, oh, you're overweight, Ant. We can't give you good insurance. That's why Ant goes to Health IQ, takes the Health IQ quiz. It's a scientific way to assess your own health literacy. Not a self-assessment, but a knowledge assessment. And they actually put this together with some of the best medical health and fitness experts in the country. It's a really cutting-edge analysis. Now, when Ant goes there, takes it, depending on his score, as well as other related qualifying factors, he and you can save up to 41% on your life insurance premiums compared to other providers. That's because Health IQ goes to bat for you. And they'll say, look, Ant's BMI is high, but his body fat is practically zero because he's a weightlifter. They know how to talk the talk to get these great insurance companies to give you lower rates. There's no commitment. You're going to learn even more about potential opportunities to be rewarded because of your commitment to living healthy. And you're going to get the best possible rate. I think that's a fantastic thing. Let's all start doing it by going to healthiq.com/twit and taking their proprietary exclusive Health IQ quiz today. It's actually kind of fun. I love doing it. healthiq.com/twit. Then once you complete the quiz, their team will call you. You'll talk to your life insurance concierge. They'll walk you through the process, and then they go to bat for you. You really can get a better rate. You're crazy to pay more than you ought to, but you've got to use Health IQ. healthiq.com/twit. Let them get a better rate for you. No cost to you. In fact, it'll save you money. healthiq.com/twit. Thank you, Health IQ, for making our best ofs possible. On with the show. And speaking of life insurance, I hope they had some for Grumpy Cat. The internet celebrity with a piercing look of contempt. He's dead at 7. You gotta love the New York Times for that headline. Grumpy Cat, whose real name, by the way, is Tardar Sauce, Tardar Sauce. That would make me grumpy.
Yeah.
Died at the age of 7 from complications from a urinary tract infection. I'm sorry, I'm not laughing. There's nothing funny about this story. Boy, Grumpy Cat had a run, though, didn't she? Her owner posted a picture of her to Reddit saying, and you could still see the original photo saying, meet Grumpy Cat. This was her internet debut. Apparently, why was she so grumpy? Was there something wrong with Grumpy Cat?
Yeah, she has an underbite and she has feline dwarfism.
That's what it was. Yeah,
tiny.
She's teensy weeny.
And the underbite makes the grump, right? You're like,
yeah,
right. So you got the...
Many people with underbites do look grumpy. She quickly became a meme. The most famous, a picture of Grumpy Cat with the words, "I had fun once. It was awful." Meme of the year 2013. People, don't confuse it. Somebody's saying, oh, is this like the third Grumpy Cat? No, you're thinking of Keyboard Cat. Keyboard Cat, there were many, but there was only one Grumpy Cat.
Mm-hmm.
Meme of the year 2013, beating out some big, Gangnam Style and Harlem Shuffle. Come on.
Listen, whoever the owner is, take a lesson from Hollywood. Wait a couple years, just reboot it with a younger Actor Cat.
That's what they did with Keyboard Cat.
That's what they've done with Spider-Man.
And Toby's not even dead. 900 Grumpy Cat items in the official Grumpy Cat shop. Shall we go shopping? Find something terrible to buy.
I've heard once.
Mondays.
I hated it.
Yeah. There were Grumpy Cat movies on Lifetime. Of course there were. She was the official spokescat of Friskies. Grumpy Cat's Worst Christmas Ever. That was the Lifetime movie. She was on the cover of New York Magazine, number 7 on the New York Times Advice, How-To, and Miscellaneous bestseller list. Grumpy Cat. Do you want to well, it's too late. You already can see it on the screen. You can make a guess. Those of you at home listening, how much Grumpy Cat made her owners in 6 years? Estimated $100 million.
Wow.
I don't believe that. I really
okay,
don't.
Grumpy podcaster.
I really don't.
Well,
do you not want to believe that, or are you just jealous?
They disputed it. They said, no, that's not true, but they never provided an alternative number. The president has signed an executive order declaring a national emergency. He likes to do that. I don't know why it's a national emergency, but suddenly it is, prohibiting U.S. companies from using telecom services that are solely owned, controlled, or directed by a foreign adversary, which includes Huawei. Huawei's been in the spotlight since 2012, I think, when the Department of Commerce said, be careful with Huawei, ZTE, and Xiaomi. They're all Chinese companies. People have pointed to the ownership of Huawei. It seems no one can really be sure who owns it. Huawei says we're owned by our employees, but without much proof. And certainly,
well, also in Huawei's case, the founder was in the People's Liberation Army. So yeah. the implication is that he still has ties to the PLA. And I think also that's part of the story too. So okay, I go ahead and finish the intro, and then I'll jump in.
No. I think that's enough. I think we've been talking about this for a while. My position on this is, I'm a little on the fence because it does seem like it's part of a political, it's part of the Chinese tariffs, the kind of the political tenor.
So,
and we've never seen evidence that Huawei is doing anything. Huawei says we've never done anything. Show us the proof.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So, I mentioned you mentioned that we're doing the weekend episodes now. And so last weekend I had Dexter Tillian on, who's a telecoms analyst, I think in London, because I've been reading these headlines. I'm like, so what is this Huawei? I'd never heard of them. And now all of a sudden, there's a huge trade war that they're at the center of. And the 3 things that I learned were A, like you just said, one of the reasons that other countries are not willing to ban Huawei is because, and even the British and the Germans have said this apparently straight up, like if there is intelligence that Huawei is spying and is too close to the Chinese government, the United States government has not shown us that. Like maybe we'd be willing to get on board with this banning, but we haven't seen the proof. And again, I'm not an expert in this, and Dexter is more than I am, and he said, yes, as far as I know, there is no smoking gun. Now, that doesn't mean if there was some sort of a conflict or a war, maybe China wouldn't lean on Huawei and be like, maybe shut this or that down. But then the U.S. has been able to do that for years. So is part of this just somebody else can do the thing that it was implicit that we could always do? But the 2 things, aside from that there's no actual proof that anyone seems to know of that there are these close connections. The second thing is how come they're the only ones basically that can do 5G, and they're not. There's also
Ericsson does it, Nokia does it, Samsung does it, but
the problem is
number 1 is Huawei by far.
They're number 1. They have the most 5G patents. And then what happened is over the last 10 years or so, it's classic. They come in and they do it cheaper and better. So if you're Vietnam, if you're India, if you're Argentina, and you got to dial up a national 5G network, not only is the company that will do it for you the best Huawei, it's also the cheapest. So if the U.S. leans on all these other countries like they're trying to do to say, no, don't use them, it doesn't make economic sense. And then the third thing was that, I said, well, how come they're the only ones left standing? Like, and Dexter said, well, it's like whatever became of Motorola, whatever became of Lucent, Alcatel. He's like, yeah, it's just over the last 20 years, everything has shifted to where, while no one was paying attention, this Chinese company came up from below and can now is the best at doing the technology that is, as everyone tells us, the key to the next generation of tech.
I should also point out, this is going to be a big, on the other hand, segment, that much of Huawei's 5G switching gear is software bound. And so when it was just hardware, you could look at it and say, well, this is okay, it's not phoning home. But once it's software and it's getting regular updates, anything could happen. And if you're a Chinese company, I wonder how much freedom, even if you're not owned by the Chinese government, I wonder how much freedom you have if the Chinese government came to Huawei and said, okay, we'd like you to put this in your firmware. Could they say no? But I noticed we don't say, it's just Huawei. We don't say ZTE. We don't say Xiaomi. We don't,
OnePlus.
OnePlus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And most of our gear is made in China, so I'm sure Foxconn would have the same problem if the Chinese government said, hey.
According to Dexter, it is the way that Huawei in the late 80s, early 90s, I think that's the timeline, got off the ground is their first contract was with the PLA. So in the late 80s, early 90s. People's Liberation Army. Yes. So when the Chinese army says we need our own national network, telecoms network for security purposes,
right.
It's Huawei that gets that contract and delivers. And then there have been these whispers behind the scenes that why does Huawei have apparently this access to unlimited capital in certain instances to win certain contracts. And so people are assuming that then that's because.
Why do you think Chinese it's so cheap?
Right.
Well, the other shoe dropped today because Google, according to Reuters, and this is not yet confirmed, at least not as of press time, as if we had presses, as of press time. But apparently, Reuters says Google has suspended business with Huawei, will no longer update Android phones made by Huawei. That's not a concern inside China because, of course, Google doesn't do business in China, so those phones are not, they're open source Android, but they're not using Google apps. And furthermore, Huawei phones will lose Google apps, Google services, including the Play Store and YouTube apps. That is a big penalty. And by the way, the Huawei phones are beloved in the United States. You can't buy them, from a phone company, but people like Paul Thurrott of Windows Weekly, he loves his Huawei.
I was just going to make that point. I mean, when about a year and a half ago, when Huawei took the stage at CES and was supposed to have this great AT&T deal to announce, they didn't. And then Richard Yu, their consumer business group executive, sort of went off script and said, we think this is really bad because U.S. consumers don't have access to the best choice, which at the time was their Mate 10 Pro they were announcing.
They were pissed because basically it was the United States government that went to AT&T and said, it would be foolish of you to sell this phone. And so they pulled out.
And AT&T exhibiting its usual, I forgot what the NSA memo said, it's unusual cooperativeness or something. Was like, oh yeah, okay, fine. But my thing is at the time,
count on them to be cooperative usually.
Yeah. Well, at the time I was like, well, the Mate 10 Pro is fine, but I don't think it's the big loss to U.S. consumers that Huawei said it was. And then what they did over the next year was build two of the most impressive and innovative from a hardware standpoint smartphones I had ever used. And now, it's the cameras, from the cameras to the reverse wireless charging that we saw Samsung do to the weird material finishes. They're wonderful phones. And now to see this develop is really a shame because if it goes through, they won't even work if you import them, or they won't work.
Well,
no
one will want an Android phone that has no Google services on it.
Exactly.
That's a non-starter. Yeah, these phones have Leica cameras in them. They have 4,000 milliamp hour batteries. I have a P20, which I guess I won't use anymore. Even more to the point, no more security updates. It means you're really this is not a phone to buy. We can't recommend this phone.
But that's the other point. They actually haven't, as far as I can tell, brought the full hammer down yet, where a U.S. company cannot do business. Remember, they did that with ZTE for a while, and then dialed it back. Was it ZTE? Anyway.
Yeah, it was.
But forget about the software. Leo, like they won't be able to manufacture their phones, and there's articles that have come out about Huawei's been stockpiling components and stuff like that. But if they can't do business with U.S. component providers, like they can't manufacture a modern smartphone. It's almost the reverse of what we were saying. Like you can't do a 5G network without Huawei.
Huawei says in anticipation of this, they've been stockpiling American parts. But others are unconvinced. The head of Huawei's high-silicon chip division Friday shrugged off concerns about disruptions to supply, saying it has long been preparing for this kind of extreme scenario. They will aim to be technologically self-reliant going forward. Industry experts say that's going to be a stretch. It's hard to... Isn't that funny? You if you ask somebody, what do you think the key components for the Huawei phone are? Where do they come from? You wouldn't say U.S., but that's what's different about the world today. It isn't just a Chinese phone. Nothing. Your car is not just a German car or a Japanese car. It's a global economy. A company you haven't heard of in a while, a company that made its kind of famous debut at South by some years ago, Foursquare.
10 years ago, actually.
It's exactly
almost
10.
Today, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It took Austin by storm. It's taking Austin by something a little less than a storm this time with a new app called Hypertrending. But you got an interview with Dennis Crowley and saw something that I found bone-chilling, but we'll let you talk about all of that. So
it's... I also hadn't thought about Foursquare maybe in a decade since it was Foursquare's heyday, but yeah, you could be forgiven for wondering whether Foursquare even still existed. But the Foursquare of today is this location data giant, rivaling the powers of Facebook and Google almost. Like you may not even think that you're a Foursquare user if you've never used the app, but chances are that you are. Foursquare's technology powers the geofilters in Snapchat, tag tweets on Twitter. It's in AccuWeather, Uber, Apple News, Airbnb, WeChat, most Samsung phones, the photo, their photo app on Samsung.
Swarm.
And essentially, Swarm, all of Foursquare's native apps. And as Foursquare's website says, if it tells you where, it's probably built on Foursquare. And all of that amounts to that Foursquare has the capability to track most people with smartphones, track their locations in real time. And Hypertrending, which is a feature for Foursquare's apps that they rolled out at South by Southwest, it shows this live map of Austin that shows basically the locations of all the phones, all the people with smartphones in Austin in real time, albeit it's aggregated and anonymized a bit. So you just see like a big circle if there's a bunch of people at one coffee shop versus a small circle if there's only 2 or 3. But it's a real-time tracking service that speaks to the amount of data that Foursquare is collecting. And when I went to go meet with Crowley on Thursday, we were going to be talking about Hypertrending, but he ended up showing me this internal game kind of app that Foursquare had been developing just among its coworkers. And it essentially is kind of like Candyland, but an app. And except for the cards that you draw, in Candyland, you get cards in order to like move along the little row, the rainbow row. Except for the cards in this app are based on real people's location data and where they are really going. So he had pulled up his phone when we were meeting, and it was like, okay, well, the Candyland that he had was based on New York City. And so he's like, okay, well, I need to move to the Manhattan Bar Square next. So if I go look at whoever is in like proximity to my phone based on who has who Foursquare has data on. I can see that there's one person who spends a lot of time at Midtown bars, so I'm going to add him to my team. And next time this person in the real world goes to a Midtown bar and Foursquare tracks him, I'll move it forward in the game, which is just insane that this company has that sort of technology.
I kind of blame myself because when Foursquare launched 10 years ago, I jumped on it. I thought this is fun, and I would fight to be mayor of TWiT with my wife or mayor of our local coffee shop. And then they pivoted to Swarm, which was basically the same thing. Foursquare became an app that would tell you about places, but Swarm was where you checked in, and I used that for a while. I think Lisa still does. I think she's in a battle with one of our engineers to be mayor of the TWiT studios. But I stopped because I thought, that's, you've got to be mayor. It was kind of silly. But I thought, well, I've stopped, so they don't know where I am anymore. I guess I was wrong. You mentioned that Crowley wasn't sure if it was cool or creepy. Dennis, it's creepy. It's creepy. Yeah. I'll read from your article. Downstairs in the cafeteria, there are 40 people, Crowley says. He's looking at a coffee company, a real cafe on the first floor of the building they're in. 40 people. Mm-hmm. These are people that are actually there. We don't put their names. We just put their unique advertising ID. We turn that into a fake name and a fake avatar, but it is their unique advertising ID.
So basically the same. And also you can definitely de-anonymize that if you see, okay, there's one person that only goes to these like 4 areas.
This is my bar buddy. I keep seeing him here. It must be 439-472-133419. And then,
just to be clear, though.
Yeah, I have one question, then you can ask yours, Patrick. This isn't from Foursquare, this information. Where this is like I'm using a Samsung phone. Is it sending location information to Foursquare?
So I believe in Samsung, it is Foursquare powers the geotagging features. Like whenever you take a photo, how it'll like show you like a little.
Yeah, I understand that. Phone, it's going to, but is it also coming out?
Powers that. Yes, yeah.
So it's a two-way street.
In order to do that, every time your phone takes a photo and tries to geotag it, it like sends out signals. Like it uses Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, GPS, a couple different things, and then runs that by Foursquare's like whole list of locations, and then Foursquare is like, oh, he's at TWiT Studios, but Foursquare also gets the data that you're at TWiT Studios.
That's the part that's weird. And we're going to have a similar.
I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
And remember, Verizon got in a little bit of heat because they were sending unique IDs from their Verizon phones. They even got fined for that. Remember how much trouble Uber got in because they had a God mode that did the same thing, but only with Uber. This is 10 times worse. And Uber, by the way, is one of the apps that sends information back to Foursquare. Apple Maps, the big privacy-focused Apple sends it back. Airbnb, WeChat.
Basically any app or thing that uses location services that isn't connected directly to Facebook or Google is probably powered by Foursquare because they have the most advanced, I guess, location technology when it comes to like pinpointing where you are.
But that's the back end of location services for Foursquare, who just happens to be very popular and so has location data on a lot of people in the same way that Facebook or Google, for example, has a lot of data on a lot of people. The thing that they're showing now, the hyperlocal app or mode or whatever they want to call it, is completely anonymized, right? If we want to believe them, this is just an application of all the location data they already have and that many other people also have.
This is real-time data, Patrick, not coming from the Foursquare Swarm app. This is coming from all those other apps.
I understand. So it's the location services that are used by many different apps and devices.
Google could do the same thing, right? Because they get that information.
Google does on the same, like with Waze, basically.
Yeah, that's my point.
But I mean, I think that I think the difference is that most people probably don't realize that when you're using Uber or I don't know, TripAdvisor or something, or having weather alerts turned on the back of your phone, that you're one, consenting to give your data to these apps, but also consenting for it to be used in the future to create some hyper trending app. Or the thing that I find the most worrying is that when I was speaking to Crowley, he was saying that hyper trending, it's going to turn off after South by Southwest, but the reason why they're demoing it there is for developers to be like, oh, we could use it in this way or build this app off of it going forward. And so this same information that you didn't really consent to be used in this way, even though I suppose you technically did, could be used for any number of other apps.
The thing that concerns me is...
Let Patrick finish, then go ahead.
Very quickly. I can't believe I'm going to defend this, but just to explain exactly what he's trying to do with this long post, he's saying we can basically build a catalog of the popular places in this city at South by Southwest. And we're doing it now, showing it. We think it's cool or creepy. He acknowledges the creepy factor. And we're turning it off because we think there is something interesting here. And we want people to start thinking about these things and to kind of, think about the uses and the guidelines and all of this. So the announcement here is the use of location data that, sure, we might have not realized that they had so much of it, but we know Google has a lot of it. We know Facebook has a lot of it. It's not that different. The big new thing here is, I guess, two things. First, Foursquare also has a lot of location data like the others, and they built this application with that hyper trending mode, which again, is anonymized and only shows the popular places in the city. So it's a way to see which locations and stores and restaurants are popular in a way that you couldn't before. So I don't know that there's something, I don't want to say new, but I don't know that it's that different from what Facebook or Google can already do. I'm not sure why it's that creepy, if I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate.
Well, here's the case on the other side. First of all, I think that they should release that game to the public, because I think that'd be a great consciousness-raising exercise for people to see that this is real people, this is what they know. And because right now people just don't get it. The other point that I think is the bigger point is that the phone in your pocket, we all have a phone on us right now, all of us, everyone in this building and everyone in the world. And Google is tracking everywhere you go. Facebook is tracking everywhere you go. The carrier is tracking and selling that information everywhere you go. Many of the apps on your phone are doing it, most of them sending it to Foursquare. How secure is that communications medium? The point is that it's not just somebody is tracking. Lots of people are tracking you, and we have no access or knowledge about how secure it is, how hackable it is, whether the Chinese government is tracking, is tapping into this information, whether it's being sold, whether it's not being sold. What I do know is that it's all for the purpose of commerce and advertising, and the advertising still sucks. It's not accurate in terms of...
that nobody's getting any benefit from it is what you're saying. Yeah. So it would be okay if somebody were making money on this.
Or they were showing me products I wanted to buy. That would be great.
Yeah, if I were getting some benefit.
Yeah, because that's the common defense is like, then you're able to have ads that people actually want to see, which I don't think anybody is thinking, wow, my ads are great now. I'm so happy that I'm seeing so many relevant ads.
Google could do this if they, for instance, if Niantic turned on in Pokemon Go or Ingress turned on a map that showed you all the other players and where they are in the city. And it would be such an eye-opener. I think these companies know very, very well, and maybe Dens does, maybe that's his reason for doing this, that there would be a hue and cry. Right now, nobody but the geeks at South by and the few people who listen to the show know about it, and read your Wired piece, but that's not the massive general population. I think if the general population, I think if Elizabeth Warren saw this, and she'd flip her lid. And I could give you a nightmare scenario, Patrick, so it's anonymized, right? It's just an ID. It's not. So I'm a Russian spy, and I want to keep track of an NSA agent. I just hang out in a bar until that agent that I want to keep track of, because I have his picture, shows up, and then I can start tracking his hyper-trending presence on Foursquare. Maybe it's not public. Maybe I have to buy the service. And I can pretty quickly triangulate, oh, that's him. Once I've got his ID, I no longer have to surveil the guy. I know where he is at every moment of every day.
That's exactly right.
I know who his girlfriend is. I know when he's at the office.
I mean, hyper-trending isn't that specific thing, but I think
it is. It is. If it were public, it is, because all you have to do, as you pointed out, you can de-anonymize it by figuring out who's that guy that's going to all these bars.
If
you can do it at scale with AI.
Let's say something that was individual, where you had an individual, like the game that Dennis showed me, the Monopoly game.
Okay, yes, you're right. Because hyper-trending is just
like
a blob,
yeah,
right?
This is more of like it's like blocks.
Right.
Hypertrending shows you essentially a list of stores or restaurants, places of business, and tells you how many people are there.
So it's a lie.
That specific moment.
So it's
right?
a lie. It's not in Dennis who says, "Yeah, I know this is controversial. That's why we're showing everybody." That's a lie. Because if they showed them the lollipop game, and what they really know, people would freak the hell out.
Well, just like the God mode from Uber.
Exactly.
That data didn't disappear. It's just that interface was hopefully made forbidden. And no one has access to it except a few very authorized people. But the fact that hypertrending exists or not doesn't change the fact that all of them, location data exists. And it has
as anonymous as you claim to make it, it can be de-anonymized. I do have to point out that both Apple and Google claim they use a technique to deeply anonymize it, which is not to take the full trip, but a segment of the trip, so they don't have a starting point and an ending point. They make some, I think, better efforts. And there are claims that you can supposedly mathematically prove that this stuff is anonymous.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like Foursquare is making any attempt to do that at all.
Every company trusts themselves, and their message to the public is, hey, trust us. We're Google, Apple, Foursquare, et cetera, et cetera. We're AT&T. We're this company. We're that company. Trust us. We will keep your data secure. We won't be hacked. We won't share it. We won't de-anonymize it. None of that stuff is going to happen. Of course, all those things happen all the time. And it's just it's something that everybody needs to be much more aware of. And I think that we need help from all quarters. We need phones that are that can turn off location by default quickly, more conveniently, more transparently, and a whole bunch of other things. Because right now it's getting to the point. And again, I'm kind of amazed at this conversation because this is almost exactly the conversation we're going to have about Facebook. Yeah. There are many points, and we're gonna do.
It's actually a good table setter for the Facebook conversation.
Exactly.
Paris, when you interviewed Dennis, what was the sense you got from him? Was he proud of this? Did he understand how upset people would be if they knew that he had this lollipop game?
He was speaking about it like it was the most normal thing in the world, and I think at one point later in our conversation, I was like, this is honestly very surprising to me because I'm a tech reporter. I follow these spaces pretty thoroughly and regularly, and it didn't seem obvious to me or my editor, even when we were talking about this conversation to begin with, that this sort of granular level of data was something that Foursquare had and was playing with on a regular basis. And I think he replied something to the effect of, "Oh yeah, this happens to us all the time. We don't realize how, I guess, not callous or how blasé we are towards things that anybody outside of our company would be like, oh my God, wow, you have this sort of information." I think he said that he often, whenever he has conversations with like his mom or sister or family members and mentions some of the things that they do, he gets stepped back into reality.
This is why these people should not be allowed to decide what this stuff, because they're completely immune to it. It's why Uber didn't realize how horrific God mode was. I mean, they're so callous about this that they should not be allowed to make decisions.
Foursquare even has it's like a tech ethicist panel. Like they have a group of thinkers in this space who they've hired anytime somebody says, oh, this might be a controversial subject.
Yeah, but they work for Foursquare.
This panel. Yeah. And I mean,
but to what Mike was saying, how do we address this? You were saying we need an easy way to manage location services. On the iPhone, at least, I'm guessing it's the same case on Android phones. It's very easy to go in and disable location services as a whole or per application.
Yeah, but the minute you open your map, it starts sending data back to Foursquare. The minute you open...
not if you disable it for the application.
Because it doesn't know where you are.
Exactly. So that's the point.
So people should stop using weather apps, map apps. I mean, so many apps know your location. Stop using Yelp. Even if you only send the location when the app is running, which is probably the right default setting for all of these, you're sending out enough information that it could be... I think the real issue here is there are so many signals that somebody with the desire to combine signals is going to get a very complete map. So really, the only way is just to not carry a smartphone. But are people willing to do that?
I think that the idea of consent in these cases is an illusion when it's just a binary choice when it comes to our sort of privacy settings. Right. Whether if it's you get this feature or you get access to Facebook and the things that you need to be a person in the world, unfortunately, nowadays, or you don't if you want to not send all of your information out. And even in the cases of, okay, let's say you turn off location services for one thing and you only use it for 1 second to order your Uber, you're still sending out just more. When we think of location services, maybe we think of you're sending out one signal, but no, your phone is sending out, here are the 10 Bluetooth signals I'm picking up next to me. Here are all the Wi-Fi networks that I can read. They're using GPS, GSM, and all of that's going to Foursquare or Google or whoever, who is then going to check that against their range of locations to be like, oh, Paris is at World Trade Center. I'm going to send her Uber there.
Just to flesh out what Patrick was saying, the situation with user control of location data apps is getting better, and I know on Android it's constantly saying, "Hey, this app is using your location. Is that okay?" And you can just right there choose
iOS
yes or no.
does that, not Android. Does Android do that?
Android does that too.
Oh, okay.
So they both do it.
iOS
They both made improvements, but the problem is that, like you mentioned, Uber. The way it really should work is at the point when you're ready to order an Uber, you should have an explicit option to turn on location for the Uber app, and say, okay, I'm going to turn this on until my car comes, and then it goes off automatically or something like that. That would be the user advocacy default. But it's actually the industry advocacy default, which is that the Uber is tracking you all the time.
And you have to actively say no.
Yeah, and you have to.
But in addition to that, you should be able to say, okay, if I want to share my data and location data for that one moment to Uber, I can only consent to it being used for things relating to my Uber ride.
There you go, bingo.
And that it can't be used
that's very true.
for any other services, or it can't be shared with advertisers. It can't be used to be a hyper trending map.
Don't put the burden on the user. Put the burden on these companies not to aggregate and share this data, because that's what's wrong.
Yeah. Why is it sent to Foursquare in the first place, I guess, is a good question. So do we need legislation? That's where I'm going to lose all of you.
I used to use Foursquare all the time. In fact, for a long time, I was the mayor of the TWiT East Side Studios. But I gave it up when I learned what Foursquare was doing with that data. Now that we're renaming it the TWiT LastPass Studios, I wonder if I can become mayor all over again. Our show today, we'll get back to the show in just a bit, but first a word from LastPass. They have bought the studio naming rights. You'll start to see that next year. I'm very excited about that. I've been using LastPass for 10 years, long before they became a sponsor. In fact, it's the other way around. They became a sponsor because, frankly, I've been recommending LastPass for as long as I can remember. Remember, we even went to Steve Gibson and said, Steve, check this out. And Steve went to Joe Segrist, the guy who created LastPass. Joe showed him all the software, all the things that LastPass does to make sure your passwords are safe. And Steve gave it thumbs up. He uses LastPass. In that intervening years, I started using LastPass Enterprise here at TWiT. And in your business, it's so important. I mean, the reason we started using LastPass Enterprise at TWiT is because we realized that this is a weak point in our security, right? Our staff has the passwords to the keys to the kingdom. I mean, the bank accounts, the websites, the databases, everything, your data too. And we got to secure that, right? So we use LastPass. That way, employees can access these resources, but they don't get the passwords. They don't get to share the passwords. And we know people share passwords, or worse, write the passwords on a Post-it note, stick it to their monitor. That's no good. That's not secure. With LastPass Enterprise, it's convenient for employees. They can easily log into the resources they need to access. We control that access. We can see what they're doing at all times. The IT department loves it. And they never get the password, so they never can share it. We can revoke access at any time. When a new employee comes in, it's very easy to add them, to onboard them into our LastPass database. LastPass is also doing something I think really remarkable, something almost, I thought, impossible in security. They're making your company more secure and more convenient for your employees. Usually that's one or the other, but in this case, they're doing both with things like single sign-on. Your employees can use their phone to log into the resources they need. Much easier than a password. Multi-factor authentication that goes beyond two-factor authentication. It uses geolocation, IP address, a bunch of factors to verify, yeah, this person is who they say they are, and yes, they have the right to access this database or this login. That's really important for security, but it also helps make it easier for the employees to use. LastPass, of course, is also the best password vault, generates long, strong passwords, and keeps track of them in a secure vault that can only be decrypted on device. That means no one else has access to it. It's so safe, we put everything in there, not just passwords, but we Wi-Fi logins, software licenses, employee IDs. Everything is stored in this secure vault. At home, I use LastPass Families, and we put our passports in there when we travel so that it's mine. No one else can see it, but if I need a copy of the passport, I've got it right at my fingertips. Same thing with social security numbers, driver's license. All the things you want to keep secure, you keep in your LastPass vault. It is the most secure place on your device, and every device too. Mac, Windows, Linux, iOS, Android, every browser under the sun. LastPass is the first thing I install when I get a new device. For home, it's LastPass Families. For individuals, LastPass Premium. And don't forget LastPass Enterprise. Their expanded business lineup has features that will improve security across your company, give you and your IT department a much better window into what's going on, and make it easier for your users. It's amazing. LastPass.com/twit. Find out how they can help you. LastPass.com/twit. And LastPass, I got to thank you for making our life easier and more secure and for supporting our best of episodes. Thank you, LastPass. And now, back to Twit. Let's see. We just talked about Foursquare. You know, I get a lot of email from people saying, I don't want you to talk about politics on Twit. But really, Twit is more than just a gadget show. When politics and tech intersect, we need to talk about it. And here's a perfect example. One of the Democratic candidates for president this year wants to break up Google, Facebook, even Apple. Elizabeth Warren, one of the front runners, certainly she has the name recognition, wrote a post on Medium. Well, it says Team Warren, but it's by Elizabeth Warren. Here's how we can break up big tech. 25 years ago, Facebook, Google, and Amazon didn't exist. Now they're among the most valuable and well-known companies in the world. It's a great story, but also one that highlights why the government must break up monopolies and promote competitive markets. Aren't we glad, she writes, that we now have the option of using Google instead of being stuck with Bing? Yes. But today's big tech companies have too much power over our economy, our society, our democracy, and then the process. And I think this is maybe her most important point. They've hurt small businesses and stifled innovation. So she says her administration will make big structural changes to the tech sector to promote competition, including breaking up Amazon, Facebook, and Google. And in a conversation with Nilay Patel later this week, she said, and I'm going to put Apple in there as well. You can read the arguments. I think a lot of people will have a visceral reaction to this. I underlined an important part of this, as did John Patel. These companies would be prohibited from owning, and this is something I've actually always complained about with Google, owning both the platform utility and any participants on that platform. It's always bothered me that YouTube was owned by Google.
Yeah.
And that YouTube results always showed up very high. There's even a bar of YouTube results on Google searches. Platform utilities, she writes, would be required to meet a standard of fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory dealing with users. That's FRAND. That's a little different. That's a patent dogma. Platform utilities would not be allowed to transfer or share data with third parties. I like that. So let's start with you, Paris. Regardless of your political bent, is this viable? Is this doable?
I think that this is viable, and I think it's incredibly necessary, especially I think if we're coming from a platform and e-commerce perspective. Sure, people think about Amazon as an e-commerce company, and really Amazon is so much more than that. I don't think most people realize the breadth of Amazon as a company and the things that it touches. But I suppose if we're going to just look from the e-commerce niche, Amazon's a great example of why this is necessary, in the fact that if you go search something on Amazon, and probably something in the first three top results is going to be a product from Amazon, either an Amazon Basics. Like, let's say we search for charging cables for your iPhone. You're probably going to have an Amazon Basics cable pop up, or if not that, Amazon has hundreds of private label brands, something that doesn't seem like it's being sold by Amazon, but is manufactured, shipped, and fulfilled by Amazon. And how the company does this is, since it owns the platform, it realizes, hey, a lot of people are looking for iPhone chargers or dog hats or whatever. We don't sell dog hats. We're going to make an Amazon labeled dog hat so that we get both in addition to the commission we'd normally make off a third-party dog hat being bought, we get the entire price of it. We get the entire revenue from that. And Amazon has the power to direct consumers towards its goods and to sync its competitors down in the search page to page 2, which means no one will see it, much less if it was at page 15. And this sort of power is something that has serious consequences for small businesses and innovators, because why would you, if you're an entrepreneur or a small business, why would you invest resources into trying to figure out the next hot product that people are going to be buying online? Because you're going to have to go through Amazon, and the minute your product ends up succeeding, Amazon is probably going to copy it and then push you back to the second or third page, or push you down to search result 5, and you won't be making any money anymore.
Talks about the predatory practices Amazon will use, as with diapers.com, where a company comes along, I think it was a former Amazon employee, said, I know, I'll focus on diapers. Amazon immediately undercuts him, kills his business, and then buys it.
Right.
Zappos. And Amazon's done with this hundreds of companies. Recently, me and my colleague, Louise Matsakis, at the end of last year, we tried to put together a list of all the different companies that Amazon owned. And it was one of the hardest things that we have ever done, because it's absolutely unreal, the hundreds and hundreds of companies that are Amazon. And anytime something comes up that is a competitor towards it, it purchases it. In India, in Saudi Arabia, and other places, Amazon has bought the Amazon equivalents. And most recently, India passed one of the strictest e-commerce regulations aimed at breaking up the monopolies of companies like Amazon or Walmart when it comes to e-commerce. And even that has kind of only had mixed effects on the company. It's required Amazon to reduce its stakes, how much it owns of these third-party entities that it sells on its site. But still, Amazon has so much of a market share that it's able to kind of get around even some of the strictest regulations. So it's kind of...
Right, and the algorithmic, Leo downplayed what they did. Undercut pricing sounds like, they have competitive pricing. That's a good thing. No, they were using really sophisticated algorithms to, in real time, undercut the price of literally every product on diaper.com to always be lower no matter what, no matter how much money. They don't care about losing money. They're making money in other places. And it's like literally they could just drive any company out of business.
It's almost classic monopoly use of monopoly power.
But on steroids, because it's all algorithmic, and now they have AI. That
he says.
Because Amazon makes almost all of its profits from AWS, and it has a total stronghold on the cloud services market, it can sell everything on Amazon, and generally does, for a loss if it wanted to, and still be able to make a bunch of profit.
She says we would spin off Amazon's marketplace, Google's ad exchange, Google search. They would be called platform utilities. Amazon marketplace and basics, Google's ad exchange and businesses on the exchange would be split apart. Google search would have to be spun off. She would split off Zappos and Whole Foods from Amazon. She would unwind the Facebook acquisition of WhatsApp and Instagram. She would take away Google's Waze, Nest, and DoubleClick, which is their ad platform. She says unwinding these mergers will promote healthy competition in the market, will put pressure on big tech companies to be more responsive to user concerns about privacy. I have to say my first reaction was, oh, hell no, because it feels like I think we have this in this country sometimes. You're punishing them for being too successful, saying, is that what went wrong? The tree got too big? But I have to say, the arguments you just gave, Paris, are a really perfect example of why it's not good for society if a company owns too much and gets too big.
But it's worse than that because, as Paris was alluding, the problem is that our laws are based on a world where, okay, so there's a company and you buy products from them, and if they get too big, and then you can break them up, and then it's a one-to-one relationship between the customer and the company. In this case, there's no pressure that the public can put on Amazon when they don't even know that the companies they're buying from are Amazon, when they don't understand that the profits they make from AWS are enabling them to lose money on all kinds of markets until they crush it, in which case at which point in time they raise prices. There was a study done where they did this in certain narrow academic markets for books, where they basically undercut these books and to the point the publishers that they were competing with, to the point where the publishers went out of business, and as soon as the publishers went out of business, they quadrupled their prices.
Right.
For that category. I mean, that's the kind of thing.
Perfect example.
Even if they don't do it, they have the power to do it, and should they have the power to do it, and that's problematic.
She also says, my proposals won't solve every problem we have with our big tech companies. We must give people more control. This is what we were talking about earlier, about how their personal information is collected, shared, and sold, and do it in a way that doesn't lock in massive competitive advantages for the companies that already have a ton of our data. Let's ask Socialist Europe what it thinks.
Yes.
Honestly, I'm not even. I'm very surprised. First of all, that she would make this essentially her platform. I did think the U.S. was ready to consider this idea. I'm also very surprised that you all seem to be in favor of it. That's another thing I wasn't expecting. But overall, I'm not sure that how doable it is. But I think it almost doesn't matter. The key takeaway I have from this is that this is now in the conversation. This is a concern for the American public, for the American political scene. And even if it doesn't happen, even if she doesn't become the Democratic nominee, even if she doesn't. Even if she does and she changes things when she actually gets into office, it's kind of putting it in the public consciousness in a way that I think until 6 months ago would have been unimaginable, maybe going back a year. And until she actually put it in that Medium post, I don't think people would have think was possible. So
I was shocked.
Creating that conversation.
Yeah.
It's a great point. So many Overton windows are being shattered in American political discourse.
That?
The Overton window is the range of topics that is socially acceptable to even raise and question.
Yeah.
And a few years ago you couldn't even suggest something like this.
Right.
But now everybody's taking it seriously. And the chances that Elizabeth Warren will become president in 2020, I don't know what the chances are, but it almost doesn't matter because they're building a Democratic Party platform. So even
it might end up on the platform.
Exactly.
Does it help them or does it hurt them?
I think it helps them because I think
America in the majority supports an idea like this.
I think that's probably true. What Americans are not thinking a lot about, on the other hand, just to play devil's advocacy, I mean, personally, I agree with Patrick in the sense that I don't care. Like if they break up Facebook and some of our other and Google and some of our beloved companies, Apple, et cetera, a lot of people's instinctive reactions say, I love the products, I love this company, I don't want them to be harmed. But it's gonna if there were 3 Apples, that wouldn't be terrible, and all the shareholders would now be the owners of 3.
It actually could create more value.
I mean, Alphabet did it voluntarily, sort of. But the larger implication is that these companies are global giants. I mean, Facebook, Google, Amazon's becoming a global giant. Apple is obviously a global giant. Somebody's going to be a global giant. And if we dismantle the American global giants, then the Chinese global giants are going to become the new global giants. And we got to think about whether we want that. And I wish Europe would step up in terms of, there's so much technology in Europe, but the funding and other cultural aspects of the startup culture aren't happening. So where's the French Google? Where's the German Facebook? Where is the
why isn't there? I mean, there is a French search
ourselves
engine.
We ask ourselves that question all the time. I think there's I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I think there is a lot of market size that is problematic in Europe. Even though we try to create a single market, and we have in many ways, the language barrier is one thing. Then even with the harmonization of laws, there are still variations with different parts of the EU. In the US and in China, you can start your business and immediately have access to, 250 million customers. It's a little bit more complicated for us. So I think that plays into it. I also think, as much as it pains me to say it, our tax regimen, or however you want to call it, is maybe a little bit less friendly to aggressive entrepreneurship. That's possible. But we have now lived in a world where we have, the as we call them in France, the GAFAM, so Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft, are ruling the world. We know what it looks like. We know what the positive things are. We know what the negative things are. I think it wouldn't necessarily be a horrible thing to try out, try breaking them down and seeing what happens. And maybe it would open up. We were a little bit slow in Europe and in other countries to get on the internet train, and maybe it was too late.
As you know, Baltimore for 3 weeks now has been shut down by ransomware. It's frozen thousands of computers, shut down email, disrupted real estate sales, water bills, health alerts, and other services. Here's the bulletin they put on the City of Baltimore webpage. The City of Baltimore is currently unable to send or receive email. If you need assistance, call us. The ransom, $100,000. City officials, to their credit, refused to pay it. Mm-hmm. And a side note, I just read an article, I think it was on Motherboard, that a lot of the companies that get hired to remediate ransomware, what do? They pay the fine. Ooh. They add 10, 20% for profit.
Really?
Job done.
Oh.
So do not pay the Bitcoin ransomists, okay? I'm just saying. But this is the great writing, again, from the New York Times, from Pearl Roth and Shane. Here's what frustrated city employees and residents do not know. A key component of the malware that cyber criminals used in the attack was developed at taxpayer expense, a short drive down the Baltimore-Washington Parkway at the National Security Agency. This is
peace dividend.
This is Eternal Blue. You remember the Shadow Brokers leak of a bunch of NSA exploits some years ago? NSA never really explained how it happened, although if you piece it together, it sounded like an NSA contractor decided to take those files home with him. So not so he could steal them, but so he could work at home. He was running a Kaspersky antivirus on his machine. One of the things Kaspersky does is quarantine threats. Whether intentionally or not, Kaspersky recognized that the guy had a bunch of really good hacks on his machine, so they quarantined him and sent him back to the home office, which happens to be in Moscow. The Russian secret police apparently have people working at Kaspersky. It's unknown how close Kaspersky is to the Russian secret police, but they certainly have access to those quarantine files, and the rest is history. The thing I said on the radio show today, and I think this, and I wanted regular people here, not geeks, is this is the problem. The NSA, the top spy agency in the United States, the most security focused, these guys really know their stuff, couldn't keep this stuff internal for long. And you want us to put backdoors in all the encryption.
Thank you.
Right?
Right.
If you can't keep these secrets, are you going to keep the backdoor secret?
You can't. Well, you couldn't even if you didn't. So
what that means is any weakness you put in any software is eventually going to be used by bad guys against the United States.
And this is, Leo, this is where I really want to give Microsoft credit, because they really took a risk in moving forward, and they came out.
We should say Eternal Blue is an SMB exploit that takes advantage of an old version of SMB, Microsoft's file sharing.
Sure, technology. Absolutely. But their legal team has come forward, and they've had a lot to say about the NSA stockpiling zero-day weapons, and talking about how we need to have a national ban on them doing that. Because what happens is these 0 days are out there, it prevents people from patching it, and rather than kind of using this for cyber warfare and being able to use it to get their own way, we should have them working proactively with Microsoft, with other architecture to plug these holes and address it, because it's exactly as you said, it's just going to get weaponized against the American people.
From the same article, Eternal Blue, the SMB exploit that allowed these malware programs to be wormable, so that it's one thing if you get one computer in the Baltimore city government with ransomware, but what happens is uses Eternal Blue to worm its way to all the computers.
Yeah.
Eternal Blue was so valuable, former NSA employees said, that the agency never seriously considered alerting Microsoft about the vulnerabilities and held on to it for more than 5 years before the breach forced its hand. The breach was 2 years ago. So for 7 years, that SMB1 flaws existed.
Right.
So, but Brianna, let me
please
counter you though. Clearly, national warfare struggles, espionage is all going to become cyber-based, right?
Absolutely.
That's where we're headed.
Right.
If our NSA our NSA is not allowed to develop tools to do cyber warfare, then aren't we tying both hands behind our back?
I think it's a good argument for that. Have you read Countdown to Zero Day about Stuxnet Source? It's a
great book.
It's a fantastic book, and I won't go into all the details, but I will say the technical wizardry that they used to basically shut down the centrifuges in Iran, it was brilliant. It's certainly that kind of cyber warfare is going to...
No lives were lost, but it shut down their nuclear
kind
capability.
Of an optimal solution, but there was a lot of collateral damage because this worm was spread all over the world. So, look,
By the way, if you fire up a Windows machine that is not patched for Stuxnet, you will get it.
Yes,
because it's endemic on the net. It's just constantly out there.
Right. Absolutely. So this isn't all or nothing, Leo, right? We live in a dangerous world. We do need to take this seriously. But in this particular case, the NSA was unable to keep this safe. And I would invite you to...
They kept it safe for 5 years until somebody who deserves to get the "There is no patch for human stupidity" T-shirt decided to do work from home.
Fair point.
If you're working at the NSA, you don't take... I'm pretty sure. I mean, I could be wrong. Rules may have changed. I don't know anybody at the NSA that well, but I got to spend a couple, a day with the NSA. They have some pretty... They're uptight
smart
people.
They're
really uptight. And they have rules in place, and I'm pretty sure...
those rules didn't stop Edward Snowden, and then several years later did not stop...
Well, there is no patch for humans. That could be the short version.
Right.
Until the government is not run by humans, I think we got a problem. I feel like we're not going to give up developing these tools.
Right.
But I think there is an analog here, and that is biologic weapons. So there is also a lot of incentive for governments to create biological weapons. But we have I don't know if it's Geneva Convention, but we have an agreement among governments that they won't do it. And the reason is these pathogens that probably do exist in labs, I'm thinking, should they get out, would wipe out the population of the country.
Right.
So there are restrictions on this kind of warfare. Maybe we need... Is it even possible to get people like Iran, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, China, Russia to agree to some sort of cyber moratorium?
I think if you're talking to people at the NSA, if you're talking to InfoSec experts, they are talking about this. The United States cannot go it alone and solve these kinds of problems. If we're talking about truly...
we would be unilaterally disarming if we did.
Exactly. So we've got to do exactly what you're talking about. Form alliances with other nations,
We're
form
so
standards.
good at that right now.
Well, it's not great, but we can change that. We can change that. So, the truth is we just can't isolate ourselves. We need to engage with other people.
It's so tempting to say, well, screw it,
but this is all.
But
this
we
is
got
all.
to try, right?
This is all one giant mess. For example, Dianne Feinstein hates cryptography fundamentally. I don't know how else
she
to say
doesn't
it.
get it.
I don't know if she. I think she totally gets it, but her priorities in terms of national security, that's much more important to her than maybe not every bank account in the planet getting hacked.
Right.
I mean, it's the you talk to people at different levels of government. I mean, one of the fun things about DEF CON is who you run into drunk at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And people who are at the front lines have a very different perspective from people at home. And if somebody spends their entire day going, yeah, well, we get hit by this, 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 and people are constant. The whole cyber warfare thing, there's little skirmishes going on all the time. There's all sorts of mayhem going on.
I just read an article about there's a little island off of Manhattan that we do practice cyber attacks on the grid. And it was just in the Times today, I think. And every 6 months, they bring down the grid and see how fast we can get it back up again on this island that nobody's allowed to visit. It's a private, military installation.
I just want to bounce off what you were saying with Dianne Feinstein. She voted to reauthorize the Patriot Act. She voted to she's very against cryptography. In my experience, I think it's faulty thinking to think any particular political party is going to come to your rescue on this issue. Yeah. When I talk to people...
I'm not talking about a political party. I'm talking about one of the senators from the state
it's going to be
diametrically opposed to the companies that generate the majority of the revenue.
Absolutely.
In her state.
And I think
a lot of the citizens.
I'm running as a Democrat. I think it's time for us to have a conversation saying we have not been good on this issue. And the axis of conflict here isn't one political party versus another. It's informed versus uninformed.
Yeah, and then we just need to figure out how to separate all the special interests.
And it's not just in the U.S., though, and that's the real problem. Because Eternal Blue was first used by the North Koreans. They used it to bring down the British hospital system, the national health system. That was the first use of it. They brought down German railroads, 200,000 organizations around the world. Russia used it with NotPetya. So North Korea had WannaCry, which used Eternal Blue. NotPetya used Eternal Blue. It was aimed at Ukraine, but it ended up leaking out. FedEx cost them $400 million. Merck cost them $670 million. So these companies could reasonably lobby and say, look, we got to do something. But I think you also have to convince these countries. And I think it's a case of you have to say the damage, the collateral damage to your problem is, how do you convince North Korea? Yeah, here's the island, by the way. Have you ever been to Plum Island, Patrick?
No.
Off Long Island Sound?
No.
Well, you can't go there.
Good.
And it's where DARPA runs war games for a massive cyber attack.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's owned by the Department of Homeland Security. Major attractions are a defunct lighthouse and a center that studies infectious animal diseases. Strangely, though, their power goes out every 6 months. It's an exercise.
I suspect they fire up the generators before they run the war
really shouldn't
games.
kill the power on the bovine.
Not a place to kill the power.
No. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I think they probably warned them ahead of time. So every 6 months, DARPA ferries over experts on a ferry, on a boat.
Yeah.
Who work to jumpstart a dead grid while warding off a series of cyber threats. At least we're wargaming this stuff.
Yeah.
We're preparing.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, Leo, I've had some scary conversations this year with people.
Have you? Kind of secret, deep background
well,
stuff?
I would just say sometimes you try to talk to people in positions of power about this, and you expect there to be a certain amount of technological literacy. And my experience has been it's not quite there.
Here's the other issue. North Korea is like the Battlestar Galactica. Right?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? They've cut themselves off from modern technology.
Yep.
So you can't really say to them, oh, you got to watch out. WannaCry could bite you too. No, it can't.
Oh, so we just do an EMP above the country.
No, don't say that, Patrick. People will think you're serious. Although they
That
come
also
not serious.
wouldn't affect them.
It wouldn't affect them.
That wouldn't affect
They're
them.
the Battlestar freaking Galactica. They're using phones with wires and dials.
We'll talk about EMPs later.
Will it break those too? Does it break a fine Western Electric phone made out of hard rubber?
That's a really good question.
I bet it doesn't. No neutron bomb will blast that out of the sky. So the Department of Homeland Security last year issued a dire warning that state and local governments are getting hit by a particularly destructive malware that is relying on Eternal Blue. Microsoft, this is the Microsoft Center, the Eternal Blue Tracking Center. Notice they have one of those fine Surface Hub.
Mostly I just like that at least one person's wearing like a camouflage thing.
You can't see me. I'm invisible right now. You don't know where I am.
Well, it's...
This feels kind of staged. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
It looks kind of staged, but it's funny, right? Because there's a blog that I love to read called Granola Shotgun, and what he talks about mostly is how things are evolving in communities and why big box. He walks through the sort of how towns and cities got to where they are with the ex-urban production, and then how big box stores are dying, and this sort of endless series of rings.
I understand.
And that's what it's coming to. They can barely run their own infrastructure without having to deal with upgrading.
Welcome to Petaluma, where the housing office is open 4 hours a week.
Oh.
Good luck getting a permit.
Oh, my gosh.
And the streets are decaying because nobody has the money to fill the potholes. And this is a typical exurb small town, I mean, I think this is... I can't imagine what the cybersecurity is at City Hall.
But, well, the answer is
it's like North Korea. They don't have a network.
Hello?
I mean, the answer is obviously there's not going to be any, Leo. And this is why there's very clearly a federal role to play in securing this. If the NSA is going to stockpile these weapons, we need to have a process to be able to get emergency patches out. And that's why I do think we need to be funding free and open source software for local city governments to use.
Maybe that's one solution, is to stop using proprietary software.
It's a nightmare. It locks all these.
OpenSSH was a mess for, we found out it had been a mess for years.
Fair point. But as I've gotten to know every single, independent government, they get locked into a different contract with another vendor. Then you've got technical debt and you can't swap it over. This is clearly a case for federal leadership. And the last thing I would say is, I forget what year it was exactly. Was it 94 that we closed down the Office of Technology Assessment
that's the
in Washington?
Story.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
This was a very well-run agency that was helping members of Congress understand technology. Now they've got nothing. Now they've got Jack Dorsey.
Yep.
In an interview in March, Michael Rogers, the admiral who was in charge of the NSA during the leak, said this. Well, I don't think he said, well, but he's thinking it. If Toyota makes pickup trucks and someone takes a pickup truck and welds an explosive device into the front and crashes it through a perimeter into a crowd of people, is that Toyota's responsibility? The NSA wrote an exploit that was never designed to do what was done. Yeah, no.
Yeah, it was.
It's exactly what it was designed.
Yeah, I kind of think.
Microsoft's response, Tom Burt, Corporate Vice President of Consumer Trust, said you can't compare cyber weapons to pickup trucks.
Or the NSA to Toyota.
Yeah. These exploits are developed and kept secret by governments. This is exactly what you were saying, Brianna. For the express purpose of using them as weapons or espionage tools, they're inherently dangerous. When someone takes that, they're not strapping a bomb to it. It is already a bomb.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is more like if somebody finds a bomb outside, like on the front lawn that fell off the NSA truck and then welds it onto their pickup truck, then I'm kind of getting the analogy, but it's...
So there is, I didn't know this, but at the end of the article, last year, Microsoft, along with Google and Facebook, joined 50 countries in signing on to a call by French President Emmanuel Macron, the Paris call for trust and security in cyberspace to end malicious cyber activities in peacetime. So 50 countries signed it, but who didn't sign it? China, Iran, Israel, North Korea, Russia, and the United States.
Right.
So the biggest actors,
the ones that are most likely to get into a scrap,
are not participating. And I understand why, because they say, but we don't want our hands tied behind our back.
It's not how I would go. It makes us more unsafe to not be working with other people.
Yeah.
So,
I think that there is an eternal optimism in these agencies that no, this time we'll keep it to ourselves. This time nobody's going to get it.
It's going to be fine.
This time it's going to be fine. I really think that that's how they think, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Ransomware was a big story in 2019. No surprise there. I have a feeling it'll be a big story in 2020 too. Coming up. A way to get fined billions of dollars and still make money. But first, a word from our sponsor, Mack Weldon. I love my Mack Weldon underwear. Actually, Mack Weldon is more than underwear. It's a men's premium essentials brand that believes in smart design, but premium fabrics. No, this isn't my underwear. I've never worn this, but as soon as this ad's done, I'm putting it on because Mack Weldon underwear is so comfy. They make socks, underwear, shirts, undershirts, hoodies, sweatpants, and they don't only look and feel good, they perform well because Mack Weldon believes in smart design, premium fabrics. They make it easy to shop on Mack Weldon. These innovative fabrics they use are wonderful. For instance, their silver line of underwear. They also have T-shirts. They're made with a natural antimicrobial material that eliminates odor and keeps you feeling fresh and cool all day. You'll find these are the most comfortable underwear you've ever worn. You'll love your Mack Weldon. And by the way, Mack Weldon's great whether you're going out to the gym or if you're going out on the job or on a date. Just every day. It's a good fit. It's comfortable. You're going to love it. Here's a beautiful silver jersey polo long sleeve. You know what I love about all of Mack Weldon's silver line is, you know how sometimes gym wear gets a little sour after a while? Not with Mack Weldon, never. So you'll wear these for a long, long time. I've actually thrown out gym clothes from other companies and replaced them with Mack Weldon. This is a beautiful polo. Comfy, stylish, and it fits great, and it keeps you smelling great. And by the way, if you order some Mack Weldon and you don't like your first pair of underwear, keep it. They'll refund it. They don't want it. They don't want it back. You get to keep it, but they'll still give you a refund. No questions asked. So there's absolutely no risk when you go to MackWeldon.com and entering the promo code TWiT. I'm in the process of replacing all my underwear, all my activewear, all my polo shirts, all my sweatshirts with Mack Weldon. I love it. MackWeldon.com, promo code TWiT, 20% off your first order. Maybe you didn't get what you wanted for the holidays. Maybe it's time to gift yourself a little Mack Weldon. MackWeldon.com. Use the promo code TWiT, 20% off your first order. Now back to our Best Of show. By the way, thank you, Mack Weldon, for sponsoring the Best Of. I appreciate it. That's really generous of you. We really appreciate that. This was the year that Facebook got that big $5 billion fine. I think it's the largest fine in FTC history. But you'll never believe what happened next. Watch. The largest fine in the history of the FTC, $5 billion. That sounds like a lot of money, right?
Sounds like a Dr. Evil.
Except Facebook's stock price went up after the fine, $6 billion. So Mark Zuckerberg is smiling because he made money. He made money. I guess Facebook was smart. They had said in their quarterly report that they expected this $5 billion fine.
They budgeted it.
They budgeted
in advance.
And so they prepared the market, right? And then when the fine actually was $5 billion, as usual, you sell on the rumor, you buy on the news, or you buy on the news and you sell on the rumor. I can't remember, but whatever, it was good news.
Everybody laments the political division in society, but both Republicans and Democrats can get behind crushing Silicon Valley.
Yeah, that is
Something
a nonpartisan issue
as Americans.
So Caroline, is $5 billion a slap on? That sounds like a lot of money. Is it a slap on the wrist?
It kind of seems like a drop in the bucket. I don't know. I remember a couple of months ago, there were a couple of other figures that were being thrown around, and it seemed like they were potentially going to be hit with a lot more money, but it really doesn't seem like this is going to have an impact on them at all.
Kara Swisher said, you really want to fine them, add a zero to the 5, make it $50 billion. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth Warren said Facebook made $5 billion in profits in the first 3 months of the year. Actually, that's not true. I think it was revenue, not profits. The company's too big to oversee, and this drop in the bucket penalty confirms that. It is true that, I mean, look, at anything with a B is a lot of money for any company, but it isn't, Facebook had $15 billion in revenue. Oh, I'm sorry, it is $15 billion in revenue last quarter, $22 billion in profit. So it was 1 quarter profit. You could see the stock jump there. Mike Isaac said the real story is that Facebook shares surged with that fine. So clearly the market's saying, yeah, slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
What do you're not on Facebook. In fact, I used you as an example, Mike Elgin, because you have Mike's nice book.
Yes. So what I did was last year I said I was getting off 4th of July. And I spent all these months this year harassing and criticizing Facebook. Of course, it did no good at all because they were censoring my posts, clearly. But I replaced it with a Google folder I call my Nice Book. And you can go.
It's a public folder, so anybody can follow it just as they would on Facebook.
Yes. So if you search for Mike Elgin Nice Book, you'll find links to it, and I invite you all. But this is my personal. This is my family.
So it's
travel.
really it's the kind of pictures you would have put on Facebook.
Exactly.
Is there text though, or is it just pictures?
There's text. You can do posts.
Where do you put your dank memes? Can you put them up there too?
No, you cannot. So each person's. This is the beauty of it. This is how a social network should work. Only I can post in my Nice Book, and I can follow your Nice Book, and then I see it in the stream. So if you're on Google Photos and you go to sharing, which nobody ever does, it's the tab on the far right.
Yeah.
You get all the stuff that's been shared with you, all the and it's kind of like a social network. So I think Google could turn it into
I
a lot
follow
more.
your Nice Book.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is.
Yeah.
So I could make one of these. What if I wanted to make one? I would just set up a sharing and say it's public.
Yes, and it's kind of. I believe that's the default actually. That it's public, and then you just share the link.
Okay.
With family and friends by email. People can choose their own notifications. So some people get it on their phone. Some people get an email. Some people don't get the notifications. They just see it in Google Photos when they go. But it's beautiful. These photos are full quality. If you click on these photos, they're full quality.
Much better than Facebook,
much
which
better than
squishes
Facebook.
them.
And you can add little comments. You can like things, and it's a stream without ads.
That's Mike's wife, by the way, Amira, who's so beautiful, sitting in a restaurant that apparently has parking meters called the Naughty Pig.
That's on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood.
Okay.
2 nights ago. But it's a wonderful alternative, because really what we want to do on Facebook is we want to see a stream of our people we care about and the photos.
Yeah, because I say all the time, I say, get off Facebook. I'm off Facebook. Caroline, do you have to, it's an occupational hazard, be on all the networks probably.
Yeah. I feel like it would be sort of irresponsible for me to not even know what's going on.
Do you
on
kind
Facebook.
of wish you could get rid of Instagram and Facebook?
I wish I could. It would be nice. The strange thing is that a lot of my peers still use Facebook for event invitations, and I've noticed people a little bit more recently using different types of forums, but it almost seems like for a lot of people, at least in my immediate social circle, that Facebook is still a way to guarantee that someone is going to be able to see something. But I don't know. I want to go back to the days of personal websites.
Yeah. Well,
early 2000s-esque, Nice Book.
I'm sorry to step on your comment there, Caroline, but this is what I hear. I'm talking to lots and lots of people all over the world, Leo, because in Europe.
But you have a blog.
I have a blog, but I know lots of people in Europe who use 1, 2, or 3 social things, and those things are always Facebook properties. So I know people who do Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, or they just do Instagram and WhatsApp. That
was one of the hardships for me. Is when I got rid of Facebook, I felt like, well, I should also get rid of Instagram. I didn't really use WhatsApp, but I should get rid of all 3. If I have any one of them on my phone, I've given Facebook an entree into my life.
Absolutely, and this is the interesting thing about WhatsApp. Americans don't use WhatsApp much, but everybody else, it's
and that's what I hear when I say get off Facebook. What I universally hear is that's a privileged point of view. I can't get off.
This is the problem with Facebook. We're on the brink where everybody I've talked to says
in some countries it's the internet.
Well, exactly, and lots and lots of people say I don't use the internet. I use Facebook.
Right.
And so
it's AOL for the 21st century.
And the scheme that Mark Zuckerberg is hatching as we sit here is he's trying to turn it into WeChat. So in China, WeChat is everything. It's an e-commerce platform.
That's why LibraCoin. That's why he's got a currency, because he wants this to be, everything goes through Facebook.
And so we're already everybody I talk to says, oh, I'm not going to get off Facebook because I need it for this reason or that reason. Caroline has her reasons. Everybody has a reason why they need Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp. And this is a problem. We shouldn't
Caroline, I had heard that younger people thought, maybe you're not as young as you look, but younger people said Facebook is like your parents' social network, and people under 30 say are Snapchat or TikTok. There are other places.
Right. Yeah, I think there's definitely still that reputation.
But in college, did you use Facebook? My daughter is 27, still is on Facebook because that's how she stays in touch with her college friends.
I did. Yeah. I mean, Facebook was used in terms of finding college roommates freshman year, doing introductions, and that's sort of pivoted onto Instagram, which is, again, still a Facebook property. So it seems like you're still sort of relying on this biggest common denominator like there's this assumption that you have an account on at least one Facebook.
It is really the reason Facebook is an incumbent and it will be hard to unseat is the so-called network effect. You have to be where everybody is. So I guess Apple had some sort of shindig on Tuesday. By innovation only. There were a few people who said, okay, if you're going to have an invitation that says by innovation, you best innovate. Devendra, now, first of all, you probably already have an iPhone, but you can't say it because it's embargoed.
I don't have it, but I have touched them, and they're very nice. Yeah.
Oh, you could say that about any old phone.
Yes.
The iPhone 11... It was kind of a weird event for Apple. First of all, they had so much to talk about that they had to jam it in. They didn't start with their traditional ode to money making and the stores, but they kicked right into Apple Arcade Plus and then TV Plus, and then they went to the watch. By the time they got to the iPhone, which I thought was going to be the story of the hour, they only announced one, the iPhone 11. They said the most successful iPhone this year was the iPhone XR. Here's its successor, the iPhone 11, now with 2 lenses. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I think the big story there was the price, which is $50 less than the iPhone XR at its launch, $699. And then they said, and by the way, there are some other iPhones, the iPhone Pro, iPhone 11 Pro, and the iPhone 11 Pro Max. Pro Max. I say Pro Max because I can't remember. They all have slow fees. There's a lot. They all have slow fees, slow-mo selfies. Apple is now in a tick-tock-tock situation, aren't they? Since the iPhone 6, they don't used to be every other year would be an S and kind of the same form factor, but a little bit improved, and then a big improvement in the next year. Like the 10 was a big improvement, but the 10S was a talk, and this is really a talk to the talk, isn't it?
I think it that speaks to like how smartphone upgrade cycles are working now too. Like most people keep their phones 2 or 3 years. It kind of makes sense. There's no point like killing yourself to bring something new and groundbreaking out every 2 years when you can kind of coast on how people actually buy these phones and take some more time with that hardware. So yeah, I'm not surprised that this year's phones aren't too revolutionary. It is nice having an extra lens across the line. The 3 lenses on the Pros. That's going to be really interesting. They really cleaned up the phone names, too, because the 10R and the 10S, and those were all really dumb and confusing.
Especially because it was a Roman numeral, so it looked like X.
Exactly. It was a mess. So iPhone 11, nice and clean. iPhone 11 Pro, just like MacBook and MacBook Pro, it's all good. And I think we're all expecting the big upgrade to be next year's when we're going to see 5G, most likely.
The 2020 iPhones.
Yeah.
But is there such a thing, Georgia, as a professional phone? I mean, really?
Professional for the phone that you have in your pocket, better than, but, no.
I understand a Mac and a Mac Pro. I understand a MacBook and a MacBook Pro.
Or even an iPad and iPad Pro, right?
Yeah, now you're starting to stretch it.
Yeah. iPhone more. Pro is just easy and quick, and it makes you feel a little bit more elite.
Yeah.
So, but... They need something that's short and snappy and easy, and people understand that you're getting a little bit more for it.
And I think the thing for me that makes it pro is like as someone who spends like literally all day on your phone, because I'm either like listening to podcasts or making software that's making podcasts, it's like I just need more battery life. And I think the fact that this year Apple finally put more battery in the back of these things, for me, like having that extra battery life is what makes it pro.
Actually,
we don't even know if it's more
5
battery.
Extra hours is a lot.
You make a huge case. So now let me ask, because I wasn't clear. Is this 5? So the iPhone Pro Max, they're saying, has 5 hours more battery life than what?
The 10s Max, like their equivalent.
So it is head to head.
It is more, but we don't know exactly how
5 hours
are. Yeah, we do know that the new display, they're saying, I think the new OLED is like 15% more efficient.
Okay.
And the new processor is likely more efficient too. So this is where the battery life is coming from. Probably not.
I've also been hearing from a lot of people who've installed iOS 13, the public beta, and 13.1, that's much more efficient. They're getting much better battery life. So it's great. It's on all 3 fronts. Apple, the new processor is the A13 Bionic. Is that right?
believe so. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm so confused.
I think that's the other annoying thing, by the way, with the Pro designation. Last year, the 10R and the 10S phones had the exact same processor.
Yes.
And that was a big price difference. Now it's like an iPhone 11 Basic and iPhone Pro, still with the same processor.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know. I kind of wish there was a little more of a bump there just to really earn that Pro title. Because right now, you have the extra camera. You have the OLED, really nice refreshed OLED screens, and the kind of slick, not slick, but like the matte glass back and the stainless steel construction. That's kind of all you're getting.
That's surgical stainless steel.
Surgical grade.
Which I thought was really weird because, like, I'm not going to perform an open heart surgery with my phone. I could see that in a scalpel, but a phone, I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me, the most frustrating thing about the whole 11 Pro, 11 Pro Max is that, as you can see here, they ship the case for your new phone a whole week ahead of the actual new phone.
I hate that. You get a box from AI and you go, oh boy, it's here, it's here.
Oh my word, it's here. And you open the box and it's just the flipping case. You're like, well,
you're really all in on Apple because you bought the Apple Clear case, which is $40. And as far as I could tell, functionally identical to the $7.99 one I bought.
Surgical grade clear plastic. Okay, that's what you're paying for.
But it'll fit just right, so that's probably important. Okay, so this is a 7-nanometer processor. This is actually, I think Apple deserves more credit for its custom processors than they're getting. This looked like, and it was interesting because they brought somebody for the first time I can ever remember from the processor group up on stage.
Oh yeah, it was like an Intel keynote for half a second there.
Yeah, it was like what 1.5 billion transistors or something. It was just it's mind-boggling what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think my guess is they're highlighting these guys because they're eventually going to be making processors for the entire kit, right? All the way up to the computers.
Yeah, and I think if we're seeing Snapdragon laptops already and Windows machines running on Snapdragon, so they are kind of setting the stage. It just kind of makes sense. Like, by next year, if we see a MacBook powered by the A14 or whatever, we wouldn't be too surprised, I guess.
This week, Apple joined Amazon, Netflix in the realm of being an entertainment provider on their own with Apple original programming on the new Apple TV Plus service, which debuted November 1st. Free if you've bought a qualifying Apple hardware product in the last couple of months, and for a year, and $4.99 a month for everyone else. Launching, okay, I'm going to say it. This is whoever is the marketing genius who came up with this one. They get a cookie. Apple is boasting that this service is the world's first originals-only streaming service. What that means is they didn't buy any catalog content. There's nothing back
derivative
catalog.
here, Chase.
There's no sitcoms or
no repeats
or detective shows from the 70s or anything that you've seen before. It's only a handful of shows that were made specifically for Apple TV Plus. And there is an argument to be made that with such a limited supply of programming, it's kind of hard for Apple to make the case that this service is worth buying. Then again, if you bought any Apple hardware in the last couple of months, guess what? You can get it for a year for free instead of having to pay $4.99 a month. So the service is out. The shows are out. They're not doing a weekly release or a binge drop. They're doing a hybrid where they've released, I think, 3 episodes of a lot of shows. Some things they've dropped a whole season, but they are going to do weekly releases of their top-line shows from this point. So rather than doing the Netflix thing, quite honestly, they don't have enough shows, right? They would drop them all and then they would go away for several months and nothing would happen on the service. So instead they're doing weekly releases after, in the case of things like C and The Morning Show and For All Mankind, dropping 3 episodes on day 1. So we can talk about this from a strategy perspective. If you've seen the shows, we could talk about whether the shows are any good or not. I'm going to bet that they're better than Planet of the Apps. But beyond that, I don't know. Dan, what have you seen of Apple TV Plus?
I've watched the first 3 episodes of The Morning Show, and that's so far that's it. As far as the originals thing go, it did remind me of, I think it was maybe in the late 90s or early 2000s, NBC had a slogan that they would run sometimes when there were reruns. If you haven't seen it, it's new to you. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was such a brilliant tautology of like, well, of course, like if you haven't seen it, it's new. And in the same case, I feel like that's sort of what Apple's spinning here. I've actually liked the morning show. I know that it's received kind of mixed reviews. It's something that kind of appeals to me, and I feel like it reflects certainly that they put a lot of money into the show. It looks good. It's got really top talent, even down to like the supporting cast, or like there's a lot of faces that you recognize. Is it the kind of thing that's essentially going to go out and win, say, an Emmy? I don't think so. I don't think that it will. But I think it's a solid effort, and it's enjoyable enough that when I finished the first episode, I kept watching. And if there had been more, I probably would have kept watching them by now. So, to some extent, that's all that really matters. And from a larger business question, there is a question of what success looks like for Apple here. Obviously, if you're giving away your service for a whole year to most of, at least your most devoted customers, probably the people most likely to pay for the service, then obviously you're not pulling in a lot of revenue that's purely based on the content that you've spent millions and millions of dollars, if not, I believe it's billions of dollars on. Yes. So you spend a lot of money. That's a lot of investment to recoup. And it's not something that you're necessarily pulling in a lot of subscription money from on day one or even on day 365. So I think this is a larger play from Apple, and this is still sort of them planting their flag in the sand here to say, like, hey, we've got this as an option. This is a competition to Amazon. It's part of our whole package that we are sort of offering to people who use the Apple ecosystem. And, it's going to be good stuff. I mean, like, I think there's nothing so far that I've heard is absolute trash. I know there's some stuff that has gotten worse reviews than others, but I think they've realized, and to a certain extent, in order to exist as this mega tech company in this day and age, that original content, for whatever reason, is a part of that equation. So I'm curious to see how they end up justifying sort of like, does it bring in people to buy other devices or subscribe to other services? What is the end of the day value proposition for this? Or is it just something that we feel like it's an investment in the longer term ecosystem, and it's kind of hard to figure out exactly how much money we're going to make out of it?
Right, because it's billions of dollars that they're spending on this content. Billions of dollars. Renee, this was available in Canada among many, many other countries. That's one of the things that's unique, I think, in this launch, is that Apple built it for international, and so it's not going to. We're going to talk about what AT&T is doing with HBO Max, which is a U.S. only service essentially. But you got to see this stuff in Canada, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are services that have fairly good, like Netflix has built out fairly good international representation, but because it is so, like, the licensing model is so fragmented and it's filled with these little different fiefdoms, you don't have the same catalogs globally, and it's incredibly frustrating. I'll go to watch some, I subscribe to CBS All Access, and I'll go to watch a show and I'll hit the button and it'll bounce me into one of my local cable apps because they have the rights in Canada, and then they want me to put in a cable subscription, which I don't have, and so I can't watch the thing that's part of the service that I'm already paying to watch, and it's endlessly frustrating. But because it's originals only, Apple owns all the rights to them, and they can put them in hundreds of 100+ countries right away, and I think that's great. And I think in general, if Apple decided they had to do it, this was probably the best way for them to do it. It's a very Apple way to do it. It's like, if we have these billions of dollars, we want to help tell great stories. Let's go out and let's just tell the best stories. Like, we don't make 4 phones a year the way OnePlus does. We make, like, we have our shot of phones all at one time. They're just making a few series all at once, and they're going to be top-notch series. I mean, the morning show isn't the newsroom, and C is not Game of Thrones by any means. They started off with good ingredients that weren't stirred very well. They got better over the episodes. And to Dan's point, like, I would have just kept watching the morning show if all the episodes had been available, and I would have just kept watching, see if all the episodes had been there. And I get why they're not, because there's a free week trial, and you could probably get through all of the content and then cancel immediately if you did that. But it's good enough, and it's getting better with the opening salvo, that I'm curious to see. And I don't know if they necessarily have to make a lot of money here. I think they just have to get their platform going and then use it to, again, increase the value of the overall Apple ecosystem for people.
Devendra, what do you think? I know you care about TV and film. What do you think about what Apple's doing here?
I do, and I've been following this closely, and I was really excited to see, like, what would Apple do differently. And it turns out kind of nothing. Like, my review title is Apple TV Plus is fine. And it is. Like, none of the shows are terrible. They're all perfectly watchable in certain ways, but yeah, the morning hour feels like the newsroom, and it feels a lot like Aaron Sorkin without Aaron Sorkin, as I think the New York Times review had said. A lot of all these shows in many ways feel like things we've seen before, and it seems like, at least right now, Apple is taking kind of the Netflix approach to some of their content, where it's like, well, this is okay. I guess I'll watch this because it's on a service. To what Dan was saying, I think this is the opening salvo, and I feel like launching this thing in 100 countries, that's pretty impressive, because Disney Plus is only, I think, going to be available in a couple once it launches in November or later this month. Yeah. So the scale of what Apple did is impressive, showing that they could produce a streaming platform. I mean, we knew they could deliver the stuff because of iTunes, and people have been buying that stuff for a while, but showing that they could produce original content, it's more like they proved that they can do it. I'm interested to see where they go from here, especially like that M. Night Shyamalan show coming up soon. They talked about some content coming into next year too. Nothing seems incredible. Nothing seems like, oh man, I really have to subscribe to this. It does seem like, oh, this is a nice benefit because I'm an Apple customer, because I just bought an iPhone or an iPad or something. I don't think they're doing this for subscription money at all, and that's why it costs $5 for sure.
Yeah, I wonder about.
It's tough too.
Go ahead, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say it's tough too because they've also not done the thing that a lot of the other competitors have done, where it's like, let's license large existing IP or own existing IP, right? Disney gets to roll out all its Marvel and Star Wars shows, and that's a huge way to bring people in. And, Netflix obviously had its Marvel shows back in the day and got to use that to sort of bolster its original, like early on. I don't see Apple deciding it wants to play in that pool, certainly not from corporate partners that are that large. It seems to be a very Apple way of focusing on let's kind of do this ourselves, stem to stern. And I think that presents potential challenges for them. And in terms of them building up their repertoire, I think it's still possible that, a show that comes out next year from them could pick up enough buzz to be the show that drives people to the network, right? The water cooler show. I think that's kind of what they're in search of. Is there not necessarily Game of Thrones in genre, but Game of Thrones, i.e. the show everyone is talking about when it goes on every week? That is what they would like. I just don't think they've necessarily figured out what show that is yet.
It does feel a little bit like these shows were created in a lab.
Oh, yeah.
They're trying to find that. They're trying to strike gold. And I get that, but I wonder if you're actually never going to do that if you're trying for the big hit. What you need to do is find some people who are on the verge of superstardom as a writer, as an actor, and they have a great idea, and it's going to bubble beneath the surface, and there are not going to be 1,000 stories in the Hollywood Reporter about it, but it will be the thing that ends up breaking through. Just like with Game of Thrones, other than people who had read those books, nobody knew anything about it, and the showrunners had never done anything before, and it became the biggest TV show ever. These all feel like, let's go to Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston and craft something like The Newsroom, or let's spend a lot of money on a high concept thing kind of like Game of Thrones, and it gives you C, and we'll put Jason Momoa in it, and okay, great, but they're coming out of the lab. Are they really going to be able to just look? If you could make Game of Thrones in the lab, there would be 100 Game of Throneses, and there's only one. And for all mankind, as much as I like that, it is. Let's get Ron Moore to do a space show because we liked Battlestar Galactica, and it's a little bit different, but it's like that. Renee, you were saying.
Mm-hmm. No, I was agreeing with you completely, and I think also they managed to get the big stars by, in some ways, greenlighting the vanity projects from their own production companies instead of growing them inside Apple. I mean, it's a good mix of both, and the risk is that not all these vanity projects or these big stars are going to give you the quality of show that you get from a writer-producer like Aaron Sorkin, or you get from lighting fire to the entire world with Game of Thrones.
What Apple hasn't done is make a giant deal with a creator like what you've seen elsewhere. J.J. Abrams, several other creators that Shonda Rhimes, Ryan Murphy, right? All of these where they're like, you have established hits and now we're going to give you a lot of money. And again, the question is, are you going to get a new established hit from that? Or would you be better off spending all that money on a bunch of people who are up and comers? And Apple, I think maybe has just been outbid on those. I'm not sure that's a strategy because they bid on those
Abrams
people.
Famously, I think there was a report that Abrams turned them down, even though their bid was higher than other places where he went to. So I'm really interested in like Apple's creative approach to like what were they telling him in terms of like what stories you could tell or what restrictions were they going to put on it?
And that was a huge.
Their bid was double. Warner's.
That was. He was a little worried about the film.
He didn't want to be locked in. They wanted him doing Apple products. Apple projects only. And he was like, no, I want to do my own stuff too.
And I will say one of the big narratives coming into this launch was Apple, Tim Cook is giving notes. Tim Cook is saying you shouldn't really put things on these shows that we can't show in an Apple store. The most cutting phrase that came up in the entire discussion was that what Apple wanted to do was make expensive NBC shows, which is a real burn, let me tell you. And I got to say, I think that a lot of that came from people who got fired off of shows or were disgruntled in some way. Yes. If you look at the material that's out there, there is no shortage of edgy material in the Apple TV shows. The three main dramas are all TVMA. No, it's not. It's not family-friendly stuff entirely.
I would say 5 or 10 years ago, before we had this surfeit of content from all of these different services, I think any one of these might have been a show that really caught people's attention. But the problem is that the bar is so high.
Yeah, we're in the platinum age now, right?
The peak TV, right? There is so much stuff that making something stand out really requires it be amazing. And I think all of the shows sound like they are good, solid shows. And not every show has or could be the greatest show of all time. But I think that just because the competition is so fierce nowadays and people are dealing with essentially a lack of time, right? There's only so much TV you can watch, especially if you need your time to read Twitter or whatever that you're doing with the rest of your time.
Very important
that you're fighting for eyeballs a lot. And I think that means you really got to bring your A game. And I think this is B game. It's not bad, but it's not necessarily the thing that's going to win people over to your service.
Have you been watching more of the Apple TV Plus stuff? I read a review of the morning show final episode, which I haven't seen yet, but it should be out this week or next. And they said it's the best last episode of any series in history. That was in The Guardian. What? All right. I'll give it a second chance. But don't watch too much Apple TV Plus, not when you've got a whole bunch of great Twitch shows you could be watching. We had so much fun doing Twit in 2019. I am so grateful to you for subscribing to our shows, for writing in, for participating in our chat room at irc.twit.tv, our new forum at twit.community, which is going great guns. I don't want you to ever think I don't appreciate your listenership. I really do. We couldn't do this without you. And I just wanted to say thank you. It's been a great year. I think we're going to have a great 2020, and we can't do it without you. So I'll see you next week on This Week in Tech. Happy New Year, everybody.
This
Bye-bye.
is amazing.